Okay, now starts the actual fitting process. So since we're doing so much shortening up of everything and we had so many cuts, like I mentioned earlier, we really want to make sure we keep the two sides of the shells even. So for starters, I'm going to take both of the shell halves. We're going to work our way from the back to the front. And just going to kind of eyeball things real quick and just put a... See, that's pretty darn close. It's a little irregular. That line looks like it's just a little angled forward a little bit. So what we'll do is I'll go ahead and take these calipers and use this this body line we mentioned earlier, and we'll go from the edge of the body line to the edge of the cut, and we'll say that it's 2.45, and down here it's a bit long. So apparently the cuts, at least this cut, is a little bit shorter up here, longer down here, whereas it looks, we'll see, this is, actually the tops are at about the same, bottom's just a hair shorter. So what we want to do is make sure that we basically take the shortest measurement and bring everything back to that point, because if we go through and we fit all these pieces, like this piece here, and say, oh, that's really great, and then go to fit the other side, but this side is already shorter, then no matter what we do, this piece is going to be misaligned. So what we're going to do is basically bring everything back to an even line and try to find that even line on all the pieces as we fit everything along. So this is my favorite thing for this. This is just a course file, and it's my workhorse. It chews through all kinds of stuff. And like with this instance, you say, okay, it's a little long on the bottom. Then starts the tedious task of just trimming it down. And you come back and check. We're looking for that same number, 1.2 or 2.45. And so we got just a hair more to go for this one. Getting close. And yeah, it would be easier to just use a barrel sander on a Dremel, but I only do that if know I'm going to be removing a lot of material. Otherwise, it can get away from you real quick, and then you're sunk. You can't put the material back. So, check our work. And yeah, it's not going very fast, but I like to play it conservative with this because you can always spend more time filing away. But like I said, once you've gone too far, that means a lot more work for you elsewhere. So we'll keep going. All right, we're just right almost there. Okay, I like that. Nice consistent line all the way down. We can only hope with the bottom part, but we'll see how that goes. We come to this side, we say we got right about the same number there, and just a hair. Let's size things up. I'd say that's pretty darn close. Looks like we might have a little irregularity, but one of those situations where you take the extra time and get it as good as you can. And another little tool you can use in situations like this where we've got a reference mark here that we've been using, but below that we don't really have an accurate point to go off of. We could draw it straight down, but what you could use also is a little square. And I don't remember what I paid for this, just a couple bucks, but you can line it up. We know we have a straight line here, so you line it up on there and we could say, okay, well, this line below our reference is just a hair short, it looks like. Which is also good for comparing. We're still trying to get that point established, or that measurement established, that will base the rest of our little pieces off of. So we still need to use this guy, but this at least makes sure that our lines are straight. And this guy will probably come in handy quite often as well. So that's just another little tool you can use in the course of your shaping and cutting and fitting pieces together. Okay, one thing I've done is I've stuck the two shells together in their individual pieces using whatever screw ports are left. There's only one on this one on this piece, and made it into, paired everything up again, just to make it easier to fit stuff and to actually make it easier to hold things together, because they'll kind of hold, side to side a little bit better instead of dealing with just half where they're just kind of pieces flopping next to each other. So one thing I noticed that I believe it was because I was kind of awkwardly holding things away so I could keep it in the camera instead of holding it closer and more comfortably to sand on it and file it. I trimmed this part here back just a little bit too far, which I admit is a mistake, but that actually works out okay, because that just means everything's not always going to go perfectly, but we can still save it. That's not going to be an issue. So we just have to make sure, extra sure, that when we're making these pieces back up, that we use our straight edges and other tools at our disposal to make sure that the body lines are all straight when we're actually gluing things and getting things put back together. There'll be a small, like once you size this back up, there will be a little bit of a gap, but that shouldn't be too much. If anything, that just means the DevCon is going to get between the two pieces a little better and be more surface area. I don't know if that's good necessarily, but that's certainly not going to hurt us at all. But I could have gone ahead and brought the top back just a little bit further to make it straight again, but I don't want to lose any more material and make this any shorter, because I think I'm already cutting it pretty close as it is to where I really want things. So for the time being, just to kind of size things up, just a side note, when I cut the rail section loose here, I used this really thin bladed razor saw and cut down alongside of the rail. So I needed to cut a slot in the top. Since we're moving the rail back, I needed to give it a place to fit back in, which actually kind of helps locate things and makes it a little easier to kind of fit together. But so I think I'll go ahead and tape the existing pieces together a little bit just to give you an idea. Also, I cut the tails off these pieces that we talked about earlier to bring this piece that used to be up here down so it sits right on top. So I'll go ahead and tape these pieces together to give us kind of an idea of what we're looking at as far as proportions overall, and get a look at the lines and kind of discuss things, how it looks after that. Okay, and that's kind of what that's starting to look like, which I'm pretty happy with the proportions as far as pulling the rail back like we talked about, having this detail kind of in a good place. That's going to put the jam door basically where we're going to want it. So I'm pretty happy with how this is all looking. There's still a bit of fine tuning before I actually glue it for keeps, But this gives us a chance to look at one issue that I noticed before, which is this step down here. Since this piece used to be, was it up? Nah, it was right about here. Boy, now we're moving that way back. So because we moved all these pieces and brought this all the way back, we now have a conflicting line where we had this step up from up here is now back here, where we have kind of a conflict between where this line comes up and goes over here. I wanted to maintain this because it kind of comes up and it's a nice transition coming from the lower line here to kind of a trimmer upper area that would be good to kind of help incorporate potential underbarrel blaster or something underneath. But I won't be able to do that because of this little detail here, and I was thinking about it. I could have cut this out and, you know, favored this bump, this little rise and this little knob and stuff like that. But I realized that would have been too many lines all in one place, where you have a pretty slab-sided body overall with a few little ups and downs here and there, especially when they're drug out across the whole, you know, 1.5 miles of blaster shell. But you have like a rise here, you have a down and an up, and then you have this here. That's just one more vertical line right in the middle, and it's going to be a big knot and kind of a confusing visually, I think. So I think I'm going to go ahead and cut this guy out and favor this main line, which is more of a main, you know, bare body of sorts here. So you line up these guys here. I think I'll go ahead and cut this out here, and I think I might utilize this piece here that we talked about before, where it's got this little step, and use it maybe over here, which was originally down here, and there's kind of a shorter area here where there's a slight transition of a body line here. It's a little different here, but I think we might be able to fake it a little bit. But at least that'd give us a factory body line to work with to kind of help pick the line up later on. So I think we're going to go ahead and remove this whole area here, line that up, and might might go ahead and just pull it. I hate to go. Tough call. I like this break. You have kind of this knocked off corner, and you know, you have all these other details that are really nice and would be nice to maintain. But they're here. We have this guy, which if we eliminate that, cut that straight off, we could put this kick up. We might be able to do that, which I think would be close enough. We have the kind of this weird bump here, which is kind of confusing. And what was that originally for? Okay, that was really kind of a pointless bump anyway. So we can take this bump here and say, well, we don't like that guy so much, and I think we'll cut this transitional piece out here and kind of help form the transition from a wide main body to kind of the narrower upper body area of the main blaster. That'll kind of help make room for an underbarrel, which I'm leaning on just with the way things are going right now, especially with what's happening right now. I think I'm going to favor the underbarrel idea of some kind, just because I think it'd be hard to create a nice factory appearing or believable body, you know, down here in this grip area that wouldn't look completely alien, I guess. So yeah, I think I'm going to go ahead and take this guy off to probably right about here where this little bump is here, this kind of weird looking bump. I think we'll cut him all the way off and kind of get him in place in relationship to this, and then we'll try to figure out how to blend it all together later. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with that overall. I think I'm going to do some trimming to this jam door. For one thing, it's a mile too long now. But I was noticing, even before I started cutting it apart, you have these kind of little slot-looking details, except for there's a big gap up here. They run all the way to the back underneath where the shell was, but yet it's kind of vacant here. So I think what we can do is I think I'm going to trim off the sides of this bump that helps you pull it back. I think I'll trim that off the sides and trim the front off so that this little rise fits right up close to the body, and that'll pull these little details forward and look a little better overall. And then of course going to go ahead and have to cut the back end off somewhere, but at least that'll kind of center up the details. Otherwise when you put it in, you're going to have like 1, 2, 3 of these little bumps exposed, and that'll look kind of weird. So I think that's what I'm going to do for that. Probably won't work on that right away unless it bugs me or I have a extra minute, since that's not really crucial to the overall project. But I think for starters though, I'm going to go ahead and work on doing some bonding, at least do some final trimming and fitting to this area. At least stick it with hot glue, and I may or may not get the DevCon out. If I can get this all sized up and in place and really like it and everything checks out, because I know we're going to stick with that part for definite, I think I'll go ahead and we'll start playing with DevCon. Okay, did a little bit of final trimming, at least on these two pieces here. And one problem I was having with just the alignment was that since we're still working with the old priming bar slot, then it was hard to get this piece aligned evenly and make sure it was sitting where it needed to be. So I took, I've got a bunch of different thicknesses and widths of strip styrene, and I just found a combination that was the right width that fit in there nice, so that I could, for one thing, prop this piece up so it didn't sag or move around at all. Had it stick out a little bit further, and also added another piece here. And that way I can line this up, and I can focus more on making sure the side-to-side alignment is right, and not have to worry about making sure that it's not sagging or drooping or going like that. And I'm going to leave those in there until pretty much the rest of the main integration's done, just for support and stability, since we do have a void here, and it's going to be kind of a gap until we can get this next piece, which will come down flush. Might even leave them in a little further. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with this slot, if I'm going to try to make it into something, or if I'm just going to fill it up with some kind of stock, or blend it in, or I don't know what the plan is there yet. We'll wait and see how it goes, but right now I think we're going to go ahead and work on getting this piece tacked in place with hot glue so we can get ready to start playing with some DevCon. So let's see if looks like my hot glue is about, yeah, hot glue is warm enough. So I'm just going to double check. I've got my straight edge handy because I want to make sure that the lines are, good side to side here, so we won't have to come back and try to either make one side higher or lower, or try to fill it in with some kind of, build it up with DevCon or putty or something like that. Try to get all these lines, because we have, for one thing, the top here, then we have a little short area here that's flat, then this face, and then this face, and then this layer here too, so we need to make sure they're all sitting correct on both sides. So it's going to be a bit tricky, so we're going to probably want to work a little slow. But I think for starters, I think I'll go ahead and tack a little bit on the back, on the tack rail there, since it's not going to move around a whole lot, so we might as well get that kind of tacked down just to make everything else a little more stable, and we'll work our way to the front. And I just put little dollops, just enough to make sure there's a good amount of material there to hold it together. You don't need to have a big solid bead necessarily if you don't want to. I find just doing the little dollops makes it easier to pluck out, and it's easier to fill in the DevCon around it. That way you've got a good solid chemical bond between the two pieces before you remove the hot glue, which is kind of like a bracing, scaffolding kind of an idea. And hot glue will remain, this is a higher temperature hot glue gun. I need to get a cooler temperature gun, just for the heck of it, since that stuff usually cools a little quicker, it seems like. But you have a little bit of working time. And see, here I was talking instead of actually doing what I was supposed to be doing. So it seems to want to be pulling to the one side a little bit. So I'm going to see if I can massage it around a little bit while it's still a little warm and get it where I want it. Okay, that side's pretty good. Gotta put a little few attacks up front, I think, just to eliminate some of that swaying. See if we can favor this side a little bit. Now while it's setting up, I'll go ahead and come back with my little straight edge and just make sure that my sides match up nice. That's looking pretty good. Actually, that kind of fell together a lot better than I expected. So I think we'll go ahead and get the rest of this kind of tacked in place. Like I said, you don't need to glue it solid, you just need to put enough little dollops on there to kind of tack it in place and just keep it from moving around. While we're letting that last a little bit cool, go ahead and kind of go back, make sure everything still looks nice and even. I think that's going to be close enough for us. So I think we'll just work on this joint for the time being. I'll go ahead and unplug the hot glue gun and we'll look at starting to mix some DevCon and getting that applied. Now that the glue's completely cooled off, sometimes you have these little spider webs left over from the hot glue gun. So go ahead and clear all that junk out of there. And next, we're going to grab our DevCon, which works kind of like an epoxy, but it's not technically an epoxy. It's a methyl methacrylate, which is a fun word and even more fun to spell. And it's a two-part, one-to-one mix like epoxy, but where epoxy sticks stuff together with like an adhesive properties, this stuff actually, it's called a plastic welder because that literally is what it does. It takes the two pieces of plastic and instead of just like sticking them together, it actually basically attacks the plastic and, you know, fuses the plastic to itself and to the material itself, just like a metal weld does. And it's a lot stronger bond, it won't crack. You can really wail on the stuff and it flexes a little bit, but it basically acts just like the ABS-ish plastic that the blaster shells are made out of. And so as far as filing, sanding, shaping, and structurally, it's pretty much the same stuff. And it's kind of a pain in the neck to work with, and we'll go ahead and mix some up. I use just a little tablet. Sometimes I just use this because it was handy. Often I also use like Post-it notes. You can mix up a little bit, peel it off, throw it in the trash, and you don't have to worry about mixing up some on another piece or, you know, mixing another batch and getting it contaminated by residue from another area you worked on, or, you know, something else that may be on the paper or something like that. It just keeps it a little more clean because it is really, really finicky stuff. It's really temperature sensitive. It's time sensitive. If it sits on the store shelf too long, it gets weird. I had a bad experience and pretty much burned out all the DevCon I could find in the valley out here when I was working during the Reddit Merch Masters competition. Because some stuff I bought, I don't know if it sat in the truck and got too hot during delivery, or if it was just a bad batch from the factory originally, or what, but the stuff either wouldn't mix at all, and it would just get turned kind of gummy, or it would mix and be okay, but it wouldn't actually harden once I applied it. It stayed just kind of gummy, wouldn't harden all the way, but it also softened the plastic, and the plastic didn't recover either, and so it was hard to work with that. So it's nice to try to get it as fresh as possible, and it's kind of luck of the draw. But if it's bad, I returned about a dozen tubes of this stuff when I was going through all that, and just took it back and saying, this stuff's junk. Let me try again. I bought 5 or 6 from one place and just brought them home, opened them up, and sometimes the tubes were like hardened already. The chemical was bad, but this I've used a little bit out of, and we're good to go. So we'll get our tablet, and quite often I'll split the tubes, separate them, because you get like a weird air pocket in the end of one. So we go to squeeze it out evenly, and you get like a big pile of one and then a big of air from the other, and so you end up wasting a little bit. But this tube's been good so far. Let's hope it stays that way and there's not a pocket in the middle somewhere. So we'll go ahead and just squeeze out just a little bit. There's our air pocket. There we go. Try to favor that side a little bit. That'll work. Cap it back up. It comes with this little stirrer stick that's plastic, but it isn't affected by the DEFCON, so even after the stuff is hardened on it, you can just kind of pick it off and it doesn't affect this little stir stick. And then you just work it in. It's kind of a white material and kind of a yellowish material, and you'll end up, the tube says it's a cream color, but it's kind of a yellowish, gross consistency. But once it's all one consistent color, mix it in real good. It's really weird to work with. It's kind of sticky and pasty, and it's just really weird to work with. And I'm going to go ahead and kind of aim for this gap here and just try to kind of tack it in as good as I can. Working on a flat area like this spot is, I'm not too concerned. I've got a trick for some of the more complex areas that I'll show you in just a second. But I'm going to at least try to get that kind of worked in to the crack as much as possible and leave some on the top. And try to leave a little room on either side of that hot glue because we don't want to trap it. We're going to want to try to pluck that out once the DEFCON is hardened everywhere. So we got a little batch there. And the stuff only has like a minute or two of good working time before it starts to get kind of tacky and even harder to work with when it starts to harden up. So you want to kind of work quick, and so when you mix it up, make sure you have a plan of attack so you don't mix it up and say, oh, where should I go first? Because then it's going to start setting up on you before you're ready for it. And I can already feel it starting to set up just a little bit. So go ahead and try to work some of this in. I don't know if there's a right or wrong way of doing this. It's such a weird material to work with that I don't even know what kind of material to compare it to as far as consistency and just how it acts. So it's, regardless of what your experience is with other epoxies and stuff, there's probably going to be a bit of a learning curve to this because it's just such a weird material to work with. And it kind of feels like we're getting close to the end of the effective working time. So I try to finish this last little bit here. I try to work in small batches, that way I'm not wasting much if it starts to set up. So, and be careful not to drag it across any areas that, so you're not leaving these little streamers, because the stuff is really hard to get off. You do have to file it or sand it off. You can't just usually pick it off. Sometimes you're lucky, but go ahead and work that in nice. Work that in nice. Now I got a little streamer there, so I'll try to pick it out because it's in this little crack, and I don't want that there because I want to maintain that nice sharp detail. So go a little bit more. Try to get it in there. Okay, now it's starting to get real sticky, so I'm not even going to try to play with it too much more because it just gets a pain in the neck to work with. So we'll go ahead and set that up on something. And let it breathe for a minute. In the meantime, you have all this leftover stuff. I just try to wipe off as much as I can off the stir stick and set it to the side. We'll let this guy cure and come back in a minute and address things.